Listen closely, my friends. There is a kind of power that never raises its voice. It does not knock twice. It does not send a third message. It does not stand outside a closed door explaining why it deserves to be let in. It simply turns and walks and disappears into its own peace, and the silence it leaves behind becomes louder than every word it could have said. You have felt this power before. You have felt it slipping through your fingers in the moment you sent one more text. You have felt it leave your body in the second you started a sentence with, "I just want you to understand." Every time you explained yourself to someone who had already decided not to listen, you handed them a piece of your soul, and you did it for free. Tonight that ends. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in the cold of a military camp, far from comfort, far from applause, a single line meant only for himself. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. He was not writing for an audience. He was not performing wisdom. He was disciplining his own mind in private because he understood something most people never learn, that the need to be understood by others is a leash, and the moment you stop pulling on it, you are free. This is a story about that leash, about who is holding it right now without you even noticing, and about the exact moment you are going to cut it. If you are watching this, something in you is already tired. Tired of being the one who reaches out first. Tired of rehearsing speeches in the shower for people who never asked to hear them. Tired of shrinking your own dignity into a paragraph, hoping the right combination of words will make someone finally see your worth. I want you to know, before we go any further, that this tiredness is not weakness. It is the first sign of a warrior waking up inside you. So stay with me, because in this video we are not just going to talk about silence. We are going to rebuild you from the inside, the way the old Stoics rebuilt themselves. Not with motivation, not with hype, but with cold, clear, unshakable truth. And if even one sentence in this video lands on the exact wound you have been hiding, I want you to do something for yourself, not for me. Subscribe to this channel now, before you forget, before life pulls you away, because what you are about to hear is the kind of thing you will want to return to on the nights your silence is being tested the most. Let's begin. Never chase, never beg, never explain. Say those words back in your mind right now, slowly, like a vow, because that is exactly what this is, not a strategy, not a manipulation tactic to win someone back, a vow you make to yourself, the same way a Roman soldier swore loyalty before a battle he might not survive. You are about to swear loyalty to your own peace. Point 1. The chase always costs more than the prize. Think about the last time you chased something, a person, an answer, a closeness that kept slipping away the harder you reached for it. Notice that the chasing itself changed you. It made you smaller. It made you watch your phone like a man waiting for a verdict. It made you available at hours you should have been sleeping, hopeful over silence that should have told you everything. Epictetus, a man who spent his early life in literal chains as a slave before becoming one of the greatest minds Rome ever produced, said something that should be carved into the wall of every heartbroken person's room. Some things are within our power, and some things are not. He divided the entire universe into 2 columns, what you control and what you do not. Your reactions, your judgments, your effort, your silence, these belong to you. Their feelings, their timing, their choice to respond or vanish. These were never yours to begin with. When you chase someone, you are trying to control a column that does not belong to you. And every single time you reach into that column, you lose a piece of the only thing you actually own, your peace of mind. This is not philosophy as decoration. This is philosophy as survival. Here is the part nobody tells you. The chase does not just fail to bring them back. It actively pushes them further. Human nature responds to scarcity, not to surplus. The moment you become endless, endless texts, endless apologies, endless availability, you stop being something rare, and nothing rare ever had to chase. The diamond does not run after the buyer. The lion does not run after the gazelle while screaming that it is hungry. Power moves differently. Power waits. So today, the first vow is this: you will not chase. Not because you do not care. You may care more than you have ever cared about anything, but because chasing was never going to get you what you actually want. What you want is not their attention. What you want is peace, and peace is found exactly where chasing ends. Point 2. Begging is the death of self-respect, and most people don't even notice it happening. Begging rarely looks like begging. It wears costumes. It dresses up as, "I just need closure." It dresses up as, "I deserve an explanation." It dresses up as one more phone call disguised as concern. But strip away the costume, and underneath it is always the same posture. A person on their knees asking someone else for permission to feel okay. Seneca, writing letters to his friend Lucilius from a life that had seen exile, power, and eventual betrayal by the very emperor he had mentored, wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Read that again. Most of the begging you have ever done was not even in response to present pain. It was in response to a story your own mind was telling you about a future you feared. You weren't begging because the moment demanded it. You were begging because your imagination had already written the worst possible ending, and you thought one more sentence could rewrite it. It could not. It never could. The only thing that ever rewrites an ending is time, distance, and your own changed relationship with the situation, none of which require a single word spoken to the person who hurt you. Here is a brutal truth the Stoics understood better than any modern self-help book will ever tell you. The people most worthy of your explanation are exactly the people who would never make you beg for one. If someone has made you feel like you have to fight for their basic respect, the fight itself is the answer. You do not need to win it. You need to walk away from a game that was rigged before you ever sat down at the table. Point 3. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the most advanced form of it. There is a strange irony in human relationships. The more urgently you try to make someone understand you, the less they actually do. Words, when overused, become noise. But silence cannot be argued with. Silence cannot be twisted, quoted out of context, or used against you later. Silence simply exists, total and complete, and it forces the other person to sit alone with the one thing they cannot escape, their own conscience. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire that stretched across 3 continents, yet some of his most quietly devastating wisdom was this: that it is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live a true life. Translate that into the language of heartbreak and betrayal, and it becomes this: it is not the silence you give someone that you should fear. It is continuing to live a life where your peace depends on whether they respond. When you go silent on someone who expected noise from you, you are handing them something they were never prepared to receive, a mirror. They expected a fight. They expected tears. They expected the version of you that begs. Instead, they get quiet. And in that quiet, they are forced for the first time to actually examine what they did, because you are no longer doing the emotional labor of reacting for them. This is why silence terrifies certain people far more than confrontation ever could. Confrontation gives them something to respond to, something to defend, something to argue. Silence gives them nothing except themselves. If this is striking something in you right now, something you have been needing to hear for longer than you have admitted, Take 30 seconds and subscribe to this channel, not as a favor to me, as a promise to the version of you that is finally choosing peace over noise. Because what comes next builds directly on what you just heard, and I do not want you to lose this thread. Point 4. Explaining yourself to people who have already judged you is like reading poetry to a wall. There is a particular kind of pain that comes from being misunderstood by someone whose opinion mattered deeply to you. Every fiber in your body wants to correct the record. You want to say, "That's not who I am. You have it all wrong. Let me explain what really happened." This instinct feels like justice. It is actually exhaustion in disguise. Epictetus taught his students a simple but devastating exercise. He told them to imagine someone insulting them and to ask only one question in response. Does this person's opinion of me change who I actually am? The answer every single time is no. Your character was not formed by their interpretation of you, and it will not be unformed by it either. So why are you spending your limited hours on this earth trying to edit a portrait someone else painted with a brush dipped in their own bitterness? Here is what the Stoics knew that we have forgotten in an age of constant self-justification on every platform we touch. Explanation is only valuable to someone who is willing to actually receive it. If a person has already closed their mind, your words do not land, they bounce. And every bounced word costs you energy you will never get back. You cannot pour water into a cup that has already been turned upside down. You can only stand there, getting wet, mistaking your own persistence for love. The Stoic does something radically unfashionable in moments like this. He simply stops talking. Not out of pride, not out of coldness, but out of the recognition that some doors were never going to open no matter how eloquently he knocked. And in that recognition, there is an unexpected gift, relief. The relief of no longer auditioning for someone else's belief in you. Point 5. Watching, not speaking, is how you finally see the truth. There is an old idea, older than Stoicism itself, that actions reveal what words conceal. People can apologize beautifully. People can promise change with tears in their eyes. But patterns do not lie the way mouths do. When you stop talking, when you withdraw the noise you usually bring into a relationship, you create a kind of silence that functions like a laboratory. In that silence, you finally get to observe who someone actually is, uncomplicated by your own emotional contribution to the dynamic. This is one of the most underrated tools the Stoics ever gave us, the discipline of observation over participation. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, almost daily, to look at things as they truly are, stripped of the story his mind wanted to attach to them. Applied to relationships, this means watching what someone does when you give them nothing to react to. Do they reach out genuinely without being prompted? Or do they disappear the moment the performance of pursuing you is no longer required? You will learn more about a person's character in 30 days of your silence than you would in 3 years of their explanations. Because explanations are designed to be heard. Patterns are not designed at all, they simply are. And the Stoic prefers what simply is over what is designed to be believed. Point 6. The need for closure is often just heartbreak wearing a disguise. We have been taught by decades of relationship advice that closure is something owed to us. A final conversation, a clean ending, a clear answer to the question, why? But ask yourself honestly, when has closure from someone who hurt you ever actually felt like relief? More often, it reopens the wound in a different shape. It gives you new words to replay at 3 in the morning. It gives the person who hurt you one more opportunity to control the narrative of how the story ends. The Stoics offer a different kind of closure, one that does not require the other person's participation at all. It is the closure of acceptance, not acceptance that what happened was fair or good or deserved. Acceptance that it happened, that it is now outside your control, and that your peace cannot remain hostage to a conversation that may never come. Seneca wrote to a grieving friend that nothing is ours except time, and that even time slips through our hands while we wait for things that may never arrive. Every minute you spend waiting for someone to give you closure is a minute stolen from a version of your life that has already moved on without their permission. Real closure is not given, it is taken, quietly, deliberately, by you the moment you decide that your peace no longer requires their cooperation. Point 7. Detachment is not coldness, it is the highest form of self-respect. There is a fear that keeps people trapped in cycles of chasing and begging, the fear that detachment makes them heartless, that walking away quietly means they did not care enough to fight. This fear is a lie told to you by every version of love that was actually possessiveness in costume. Real love, the kind the Stoics described, does not require proximity to prove its depth. You can love someone fully and still walk away from the version of the relationship that was costing you your dignity. Marcus Aurelius lost children. He lost friends to betrayal. He lost the comfort of certainty in nearly every chapter of his life, and yet his writings are not bitter. They are calm. Because he understood that detachment from outcome is not detachment from caring. It is caring enough about your own soul that you refuse to let it be dragged through the same mud over and over, hoping for a different result. When you detach in silence, you are not punishing anyone. You are simply removing your own dignity from a place where it was being neglected. And here is the part that surprises people most. Detachment, real detachment, often does more to change another person's behavior than any confrontation ever could. Not because you are trying to manipulate them into chasing you, but because human beings by nature only fully register the value of something the moment it stops being guaranteed. If you have made it this far, you are no longer the same person who pressed play on this video. Something in you has already begun to separate from the noise. Before we go further into the deeper layers of this, I want to ask you for something small but meaningful. Comment one word below that describes the silence you are choosing to build starting today. Not for engagement, for accountability, because writing it down, even publicly, even anonymously, is an ancient Stoic practice in itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private thoughts down nightly, not for an audience of millions, but for an audience of one, himself, becoming someone he could respect in the morning. Point 8. Every reaction you withhold is strength deposited into a bank you will draw from for the rest of your life. There is a mathematics to self-control that no one teaches you in school. Every time you feel the urge to respond, to defend, to explain, to chase, and you choose not to, you are not losing anything. You are making a deposit. A deposit of discipline, a deposit of self-trust, a deposit that compounds over time into something the ancient Stoics called apatheia. Not apathy in the modern lazy sense of not caring, but a freedom from being violently jerked around by every emotional impulse that passes through you. This is why the Stoics trained themselves daily, the same way an athlete trains a muscle. They practiced small denials, a cold bath when warmth was available, silence when speech was easier, patience when anger would have felt more satisfying. Not because suffering is noble for its own sake, but because the muscle of self-command, once built, becomes available to you in the moments that actually matter. The moment someone disrespects you, and your old self would have begged for an apology, the moment someone leaves and your old self would have chased the door. You are building that exact muscle right now, simply by listening to these words and recognizing yourself in them. Recognition is the first rep. Point 9. The world will call your peace arrogance, and you must let them. One of the cruelest tricks the world plays on people who finally choose themselves is this. It rebrands their healing as coldness. The moment you stop over-explaining, certain people will call you distant. The moment you stop chasing, certain people will call you proud. The moment you stop begging for understanding, certain people will say you have changed, and not in a way they like. Let them. Epictetus warned his students that they would face exactly this, that choosing a philosophical life, a life governed by your own values rather than the opinions of a crowd, would cost them the approval of people who only valued the version of them that was easy to control. He did not promise his students comfort. He promised them freedom, and he was honest that the two rarely arrived together. The people most upset by your new silence are very often the people who benefited most from your old noise. Your chasing fed something in them, a sense of importance, a sense of control, a guarantee that no matter how they treated you, you would still be there asking for more. When you remove that guarantee, you are not being cruel. You are simply no longer available to be used, and the discomfort that causes in them is not your responsibility to soothe. Point 10. Silence is the only language that cannot be misquoted. Think of every conflict you have ever had that escalated specifically because of words. Words taken out of context. Words repeated to others with a different tone than you intended. Words that, once spoken, could never fully be retracted, no matter how many times you tried to clarify them afterward. Words are slippery. They can be twisted by people determined to see you as the villain in their story. Silence cannot be twisted this way. Silence has no syllables to misquote, no tone to misinterpret, no sentence to screenshot and send to someone else with a caption designed to make you look small. When you choose silence over explanation in moments of conflict, you are choosing the one form of communication that protects you completely. You are saying everything and nothing at the same time, and you are leaving no material for anyone to use as a weapon against you later. This was not weakness for the Stoics. It was strategy and dignity fused into one decision. Marcus Aurelius, ruling over an empire full of people eager to misrepresent his every move for political gain, understood that the wisest response to manipulation was very often no response at all. Let them construct their version of events in the empty air. The truth does not need your defense. It survives on its own, in its own time, the way it always has. Point 11. You do not need to forgive out loud to be free. There is a misconception that healing requires a conversation, that you must confront the person who hurt you, tell them exactly how they wounded you, and receive some kind of acknowledgement before you are allowed to move on. The Stoics rejected this entirely. They believed that your freedom was never dependent on someone else's awareness of your pain. You can forgive someone in complete silence. You can release the weight of what they did to you without them ever knowing it happened. In fact, this kind of forgiveness is often more powerful because it asks nothing of the person who hurt you. It does not wait for their apology. It does not require their understanding. It simply happens quietly, inside you, on your own timeline, governed entirely by your own readiness. This is the deepest form of the silence we have been describing this entire hour. Not a silence aimed at punishing someone else, a silence aimed inward, toward your own peace, that simply does not need an audience to be complete. Point 12. Practice the pause, and the pause will eventually become your nature. Nothing in this video works as a single decision made once and forgotten. The Stoics did not become Stoic by reading a single letter from Seneca and feeling inspired for an afternoon. They built this discipline through daily repeated practice, through choosing again and again, in moment after moment, to pause before reacting, to question before believing, to remain quiet before explaining. So here is your practice, starting today. The next time you feel the urge to send the message that proves your point, wait, not forever, just long enough to ask yourself one question. Am I about to spend my peace on someone who has never once protected it for me? If the answer is yes, let the message stay unsent. Let the silence stand in its place. Watch what changes, not necessarily in them, but in you. Over time, this pause stops being a struggle. It becomes instinct. You will reach moments of disrespect, betrayal, even heartbreak, and instead of reaching for your phone, you will simply breathe and let the moment pass through you without demanding anything from you in return. This is not numbness, this is mastery. Point 13. Your absence is the only message some people will ever understand. There are people in this world who cannot be reached by words, no matter how carefully chosen, no matter how patiently delivered. These are people who only register loss when it has already happened, who only value presence the moment it is withdrawn. For these people, your silence is not just a strategy. It is the only language fluent enough to reach them. You do not need to announce your absence. You do not need a farewell speech, a final paragraph explaining your decision, a dramatic exit designed to be felt. The most powerful absences in history were quiet ones. You simply stop being available in the way you used to be, and you let that fact speak for itself in its own time, without your narration. This is the final teaching, and perhaps the hardest one to live by. The people who deserve your words will never make you fight to be heard, and the people who make you fight to be heard were never going to value the words you finally found the strength to give them anyway. Let your silence be the last thing you offer the people who only ever wanted your noise. Let your peace be the thing you protect above being right, above being understood, above being missed. You do not need their permission to heal. You do not need their applause to grow. You only need the quiet, steady, unglamorous discipline of choosing yourself over and over until it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like who you simply are. If even one sentence in this hour found its way into the exact place inside you that needed it, that was not an accident. That was your own readiness meeting the right words at the right time. Hold on to that thread, because we are only halfway through what this silence can teach you, and the deeper layers we are about to walk through will ask more of you than the first half did. Point 14. The body remembers what the mind tries to forgive too quickly. There is a mistake people make when they decide to practice silence and detachment. They think the work is purely mental, a matter of willpower, a matter of simply deciding to stop reacting. But the Stoics, for all their emphasis on reason, never denied the body's role in this. Zeno of Citium, the founder of the school itself, taught his students in the Stoa, the covered walkway in Athens that gave Stoicism its name, that virtue was a practice of the whole self, not a debate confined to the mind. Your body holds the chase even after your thoughts have let it go. You will notice this in the tightness in your chest when their name appears on a screen. You will notice it in the way your hands move toward your phone before your conscious mind even registers the impulse. This is not failure. This is simply the residue of old patterns, and the Stoics had a name for the work of clearing that residue. Ascesis, the discipline of training, the same root word that gives us ascetic, not punishment, training. So when you feel your body pulling you toward the old behavior, the chase, the explanation, the second message, do not fight it with shame. Notice it the way a soldier notices an old wound ache before rain. Acknowledge it, breathe through it, and let the moment pass without obeying it. Each time you do this, the ache grows quieter. This is not instant. No real transformation ever is. But it is certain, the same way a path through a forest becomes clearer the more it is walked. Point 15. betrayal is not proof that you are unlovable. It is proof that someone else was incapable of loving well. One of the cruelest lies the mind tells after betrayal is that the betrayal was a verdict on your worth, that if you had been smarter, prettier, calmer, more patient, more understanding, this would not have happened to you. The Stoics offer a sharp correction here, one that Epictetus delivered to his students again and again. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about events. The betrayal happened. That is fact, unchangeable, belonging to the past. But the meaning you assign to it, that is yours to choose, and most people choose the meaning that hurts them the most. Consider an alternative judgment. Someone's capacity to betray you was never about your value. It was about the limits of their own character, limits that existed long before you ever met them, limits that would have surfaced eventually with anyone who got close enough. You did not cause their dishonesty. You simply happened to be standing nearby when it revealed itself. This is not a comfortable thought the first time you have it, but it is a true one, and the Stoics believed that truth, however uncomfortable, was always more healing than a comfortable lie. Cato the Younger, a man so devoted to his principles that he chose death over living under a tyrant's rule, was famous for a single trait, above all others. He could not be moved by the opinions of people who had already shown him who they were. He did not waste his final years trying to convince Caesar to see him differently. He simply lived according to his own values, and let history judge the rest. You do not need Caesar's approval. You do not need the approval of the person who betrayed you. You need only your own continued alignment with who you know yourself to be. Point 16. Modern noise has made ancient silence rare, and rare things become powerful again the moment they return. We live in an age engineered against silence. Every app on your phone is built to demand a reaction from you within seconds. Every notification is a small test of your discipline, asking you to respond now, to explain now, to defend yourself now, before the moment passes and someone else fills the silence with their own version of events. This environment did not exist for Marcus Aurelius. It did not exist for Seneca, and yet their wisdom about silence applies more urgently now than it ever did in their own time, because we have built a world specifically engineered to make silence feel impossible. This is exactly why practicing it today carries more power than it ever did before. In a world of constant reaction, the person who does not react becomes almost mythical. Think about the people you have known in your own life who rarely explained themselves, who rarely defended their choices in long paragraphs, who simply lived and let their lives speak for them. Did you not find yourself, almost against your will, more curious about them, more respectful of them than the people who explained everything in exhausting detail? This is not an accident of personality. It is a law of human psychology that the Stoics understood 2,000 years before psychology existed as a science. Scarcity creates value. Constant availability destroys it. Every time you resist the urge to respond instantly, you are not falling behind in some imaginary race. You are doing something almost nobody around you has the discipline to do, and that alone makes you rare. Point 17. Stop confusing peace with numbness. There is a fear that holds many people back from this kind of discipline. The fear that if they stop reacting, stop explaining, stop chasing, they will become cold, hollow, disconnected from their own feelings. This fear misunderstands what Stoic silence actually is. The goal was never to stop feeling. Seneca grieved. Marcus Aurelius mourned children he buried with his own hands. These were not unfeeling men. They were men who refused to let their feelings dictate actions that betrayed their own dignity. You are allowed to feel the full, unfiltered weight of heartbreak, betrayal, loneliness, even rage. Feel it completely, in private, in silence, in the company of your own honest reflection. What you are not required to do is perform that feeling for an audience that has already shown you they do not deserve to witness it. There is a difference between suppressing an emotion and simply choosing who gets to see it. The Stoic suppresses nothing. He simply decides, with total clarity, where his vulnerability is welcome and where it is not. This distinction matters enormously because numbness eventually breaks down into something worse, a quiet despair that convinces you nothing matters at all. Stoic silence is the opposite. It is the disciplined channeling of feeling into private reflection rather than public performance. And from that private reflection, real clarity eventually emerges. You are not becoming less human by practicing this. You are becoming more deliberately, carefully human than you have ever allowed yourself to be. Point 18. The right people will never require your silence to be broken in order to love you well. There is an important balance in everything we have discussed tonight, and it deserves to be said plainly before we go further. The silence we are describing is not a permanent wall built against every relationship in your life. It is a discipline reserved for situations where your words have been wasted, where your explanations have been weaponized, where your presence has been taken for granted by people who never had to work to keep it. The people who genuinely deserve your voice will never make silence necessary in the first place. They will ask how you are and mean it. They will notice your absence before you have to manufacture one to teach them a lesson. They will not require you to detach in order to be appreciated, because they were already appreciating you in real time with their actions, without prompting. So as you build this new discipline, do not mistake it for a blanket policy against vulnerability with everyone in your life. Reserve it specifically for the dynamics that have cost you your dignity. Use it as a scalpel, not a wall. The goal is not to become unreachable to everyone. The goal is to become unreachable specifically to the people and patterns that never deserved access to you in the first place. Point 19. Write your own private letters the way the Stoics did, and never send them. One of the most striking things about ancient Stoic writing is how much of it was never intended for an audience. Marcus Aurelius's meditations were private journal entries, written in a tent on military campaigns, addressed to no one but himself. Seneca's letters to Lucilius, even though Lucilius was a real person, often read more like a man working through his own thinking out loud than a man trying to convince another of anything. Borrow this practice directly. When you feel the urge to explain yourself to someone who hurt you, write the letter. Write every furious, wounded, desperate word you want to say. Then do not send it. Read it back to yourself the next day, and notice how much of it was really about them, and how much of it was actually about you, trying to process your own pain through the illusion of an audience. Burn the letter, delete the letter, keep it in a drawer you never open again, but never send it. This single practice will save you from more regretted messages than almost anything else in this video. It gives the urge to explain somewhere to go without giving away your dignity to someone who has not earned the right to witness your unfiltered grief. You will find, almost every time, that the letter you needed to write was never really for them. It was for the version of you finally getting to say the things you had been swallowing for far too long. Point 20. Loneliness in silence is temporary. Self-betrayal in noise is permanent. There will be nights in the middle of this practice where the silence feels unbearable, where the absence of contact feels less like power and more like punishment you are inflicting on yourself. This is the moment most people abandon the discipline entirely, reaching for their phone, sending the message they swore they would not send, undoing weeks of hard-won peace in a single moment of weakness. I want you to remember something in that exact moment, because it will come. and how you handle it will determine everything that follows. The loneliness of silence is temporary. It rises, it peaks, and it passes. The same way every emotion you have ever survived has eventually passed. But the damage of breaking your own discipline in a moment of weakness does not simply pass. It teaches your own nervous system that your resolve can be overridden by discomfort, and that lesson becomes harder to unlearn every time you repeat it. So when the loneliness comes, do not reach for them. Reach for the version of you that started this practice for a reason. Reach for the discomfort itself, and sit with it the way the Stoics sat with cold water, with hunger, with discomfort deliberately chosen to build resilience for the discomfort that is not chosen. You are not avoiding the pain of loneliness. You are simply refusing to trade it for the much larger pain of betraying your own progress. Even one sentence in this video found its way into the exact place inside you that needed it. That was not an accident. That was your own readiness meeting the right words at the right time. Let that be enough. Subscribe to this channel if you want more of this. Not noise, not hype. Just the same kind of quiet, unshakable truth that the old philosophers spent their entire lives trying to live by, and that you are now, finally, beginning to live by too. Carry this with you when the silence gets tested. Carry it when someone you miss finally reaches out, and the old you wants to forgive everything in a single breath. Carry it when no one reaches out at all, and you have to be the only witness to your own strength. You do not need them to see it for it to be real. Your silence is not absence. Your silence is the loudest thing you have ever said.